Have you ever thought, is this just me when struggling to stay organized, start tasks, or manage time? For those of us over 50, these challenges might not be just aging. They could be ADHD hiding in plain sight for decades. I'm Jami Shapiro, host of Grandma Has ADHD, and I'm building a community where your experiences matter. Whether you're diagnosed, questioning, or simply curious, you're not alone. Our Facebook group is filled with vibrant, understanding people over 50 who share their stories, strategies, and yes, even their struggles, with plenty of laughter along the way. Ready to find your people? Join our growing Grandma Has ADHD Facebook community. Please like and subscribe to the podcast wherever you listen and share it with someone who might need to hear they're not alone, because ADHD doesn't have an age limit and neither does understanding yourself better. Together, we're changing the conversation about ADHD after 50. Come be part of the story. I am so excited to be talking to you, Michelle Rowlinson, who is in England. She is the author of Perimenopause and has her own podcast. And when we were speaking, we both agreed that we should interview each other on each other's podcast. So both of us are trying something different. When you have an ADHD brain, thankfully you get to pivot easily. And we thought because our conversation on the phone was so good, we would pause it and bring it to you because we both have so much to share in our respected areas. So did I start that well for us, Michelle?
Yes, definitely.
Do you want me to ask you some questions or you want
Go
to?
ahead. We'll just kind of bounce off each other.
So how we got involved is that for those of you who listen to the Grandma Has ADHD podcast, and for those of you who are joining us from Michelle's podcast, welcome. I host the Grandma Has ADHD podcast, and it's really for women over 50 who are discovering ADHD. And some of us have been diagnosed, and some of us are questioning, and some of us totally see it, and we just never knew that that's what it was. And so it's a whole new conversation to ADHD. And for many of us over 50, it's just a whole new way of looking at ourselves. And there are two times that a woman is most likely to be diagnosed. One is when she has a child diagnosed, as was the case for me when the psychiatrist was evaluating my child, Will. And I was like, I'm answering more yeses for me than for Will. Do I have it? Having no idea. And of course, the answer was yes. And the other time is when a woman enters perimenopause. So, what a natural conversation to be having with someone who is an expert on menopause.
No, thank you. And obviously, you've written a book on this as well. But if we kind of strip it right back, you've said obviously when your child was being diagnosed, but were there sort of any traits or moments like in your life when you sort of went, hang on, this might be ADHD? Or was it literally just when your child was getting diagnosed?
Oh, that's a great question. Actually, no. So when I was married, my ex-husband would, I call him my husband, would accuse me of having ADHD. And I had a brother who had been diagnosed in the 80s and had to be put on Ritalin and couldn't sit still and was the kid bouncing off the walls. And so in my mind, as it is for many people, ADHD is that hyper little boy jumping off the wall. So when he said I had it, I'm like, no, I don't. And of course, when I discovered that it was not just those hyperactive little boys, then it was very easy to see that I had had it my entire life, but didn't recognize it.
Yeah. And this is it. I mean, I was probably more typically boy symptoms because I was the one bouncing off the walls. Literally, even in nursery, you'd be lucky if I'd completed one thing where all these kids were, at each table where you make something and all these children would come out with armfuls of things that they'd made, and you were lucky if I'd sort of completed just one of them. So it was sort of more obvious with me. But why do you think it's like so many sort of go under sort of the radar for so long, and mainly especially with sort of women?
Yeah. So first of all, I'm distracted because we are
recording on a different platform. We decided to use Michelle's, and the sun is streaming in my normal platform place, and I'm holding the phone. So I need to just address that. And I don't know about your podcast, Michelle, but I don't edit these things because I've decided that when I keep it really real for people and they get to see that you can be imperfect in the world, because perfectionism is one of the biggest problems for, people with ADHD, is that if we can't get it perfect, then we shouldn't do it. So I just want to address, to me, it's the elephant in the room because I, of course, can see myself. But I want to go, I actually remembered what you asked me. So this is actually how I got into this whole thing. So my child was in middle school, and this was a little more than 10 years ago when I realized that I had ADHD. So at this time, I'm 45 years old. I have 3 kids. I'm going through a divorce and I'm starting a business. So I'm like, okay, I'm 45. I have ADHD. No big deal. I've lived 45 years. I graduated college with high honors, was able to focus. That was how I felt about it. And I was actually, because of the business, so I own a business in San Diego, California called Silver Linings Transitions. And I started it as part of the National Association of Senior and Specialty Move Managers. And that's important and relevant to the story because it is an organization that goes in, and we used to predominantly help seniors when they were making a move. And we would handle all the logistics of the move, all the packing, all the unpacking, coordinating all of the different people involved, helping make the decisions about what people are going to keep or not keep. Which, if you listen to that, there's a lot of executive functioning going on in the work that we were doing. So I am starting this business, and I'm starting to see a lot of people's homes that remind me of my mom's home, which has a lot of clutter in it. And in fact, my mother's clutter was always a source of conflict for the two of us because my mom just kept accumulating. And I used to do presentations on downsizing and right sizing. And I would tell the audience, I come from a family with hoarding disorder, because if you had seen my mom's home, and you had seen the stacks of everything, you would have said, yeah, this woman's a hoarder, which we don't use that word, by the way. But I was listening to a podcast because I was getting some training on organizing, and I had joined the ICD, which is the Institute for Challenging Disorganization. So that's another thing that anybody with ADHD, or even not, I mean, people that just can help with people who struggle with clutter or chronic disorganization. So I was listening to a podcast, and I heard the interview mention that fibromyalgia and migraine headaches were common in people with ADHD. And I just like paused, and I'm like, oh my gosh, my mom has had unexplained migraine headaches and fibromyalgia as long as I can remember, with no explanation. And so I called my mom, and she was 76 at the time. And I said, Mom, I don't think you have hoarding disorder. I think you have ADHD. Well, my father was hyperactive and my brother was hyperactive again. So that was my version of ADHD. So sure enough, I start to learn more about ADHD. I end up becoming an ADHD coach, because when you are someone with ADHD, you take the fixation and you just keep going with it, right? So I think the reason that it's been missed is that we all have this misconception that it's only the hyperactive little boy. We have generations of women that we were not a behavior issue because we internalized our struggles. I mean, we masked so well. We had perfectionism, but we were burning out because it was just exhausting. In fact, in my book, and I'm just going to put a quick plug in, it's called This Explains So Much. And if you can see the picture of it, there are different pictures that represent ADHD to me. So one is the clutter, one is the disco ball with the brain that just constantly going. One's a chocolate chip cookie because a lot of us crave sugar, but then the H has a girdle on it. And I don't know if you ever wore a girdle, but they're like having to suck it all in and then being able to like let it go. And that's the freedom of like taking off the mask, taking off the girdle. And so I think that we're finally understanding that ADHD isn't just hyperactive little boys. And we're realizing that we have full generations of people. And that was part of how we came to this conversation, which I want to share later. So remember to remind me about the Salem Witch Trials. That's a really key conversation for us to have. But I want to talk to you about how you got involved in your work with menopause. So give me that story.
Yeah, so basically, I was going through 7 years of what I can only describe as absolute hell, where I had no idea what was going on. One minute, things seemed okay, and then I was putting on weight. I put on like 20 kilos in weight. My hair was falling out, acne, heart palpitations, but it was more the insomnia and the feeling like I had dementia that was the worst part,
Mm-hmm.
where I would literally look at my diary at work and get to the waiting room and I couldn't remember the name of my patient, which was fine if I'd already treated them because obviously I wouldn't forget their face, but I couldn't remember their name and I'd have to like pretend with the receptionist going, oh, I just need to check something. And then just thought I was absolutely bonkers. And every time I went to the GP, they were just sort of saying, oh, you're just stressed, depressed. Cardiologist offered me beta blockers for the heart palpitations, which thankfully I was like, well, will I die without them? And they're like, no. I was like, well, then I won't take them. Um,
Mm.
and it all just came about where basically I had a massive panic attack in a supermarket over whether I was going to get the wrong cereal. It was
Mm.
literally that stupid looking back, but it was like, it was honestly, I felt like I just didn't know what to do. And I had to run out the shop. And that's when I just sat in the car going, this is not normal. There has to be a reason. Or is it dementia? Or is it something serious? And that was when I sort of got on Mr. Google and found the word perimenopause that I'd never even heard of, even as a health professional who had done a women's health placement.
Wow.
It was all pregnancy and prolapses, no mention of menopause.
Mm-hmm.
We were told women 40 plus were more predisposed to frozen shoulder, tendinopathy, joint pain, but not why or not the significance of like menopause anyway. And yeah, and that was when I then did more research, got more into sort of anti-inflammatory diets, which then I realized ingredients were quite often, especially for keto or more American or expensive Amazon or words that are really long, that if they were putting me off cooking and I love to cook, it was like, wow, this is going to put many women off. So that's where I then went on to write my book, Yumi Conquering Perimenopause and Menopause, that's got advice on intermittent fasting, keto, Mediterranean with recipes. And it just went bang. Literally, I didn't think really it'd do a lot. I thought, well, it just helps even a few women. That would be great.
Mm-hmm.
And it went bestseller in like hours in
That's
multiple,
amazing. That is
multiple. I
amazing.
know. And then women started asking me for advice. And I was like, holy crap, I better get qualified at this.
Okay, so tell me again
Spiraled.
the name of your book, because is it you, me,
Conquering perimenopause and
y-
menopause.
you, me, conquering perimenopause and menopause? So I have to tell you, it was 2020, and I ended up with a frozen shoulder, and I never even was told that it could be connected to perimenopause. And so, there's more and more information out there now, even than there was 5 years ago. But yeah, so I first of all, I have to acknowledge that your book went and bestseller that quickly. That is unbelievable. And I think you were also telling me that you wrote it more in the UK because the ingredients are a little bit different than they are in the US. Was that
Yeah,
part of it?
yeah, because I find keto especially, it's been more Americans that have written advice about recipes. And so when you're Googling keto recipes, they generally are either expensive Amazon or American. And I just wanted something that was more accessible and easy to follow for women all around the world, because the ingredients I've used, other than the change of name, like zucchini instead of courgette and things like that, but generally the recipes, you can get them in supermarkets all around the world. And that was more the point. I wanted everybody to be able to follow these diets with ease rather than going, oh, this is so difficult.
So speaking of following a diet, we talked about the fact that we both have ADHD, right? So for me, if you give me too many ingredients, I'm going to freak out and I'm not going to do it. So how does your book relate to someone with ADHD? Have you ever considered that?
Because I suppose it's one of the feedbacks I got was that it's very easy to read.
Mm,
So I have had some women say they absolutely hate reading, which is, funnily enough, dyslexia is quite a common thing with
yeah.
ADHD, which is what I have as well. And I can't stand reading, which is why if you'd have said to me, you're going to write a book, I'd have been like, yeah, right, whatever. So I suppose that's why it must have sort of come through where it's just very easy to read. And with the recipes, again, there's not that many ingredients.
So what
So
what do you tell people to eat? What do you recommend?
Just very
generally. I mean, I want them to buy your book, but
yeah, it's sort of whole food. So
yeah.
it's non-processed really. It's especially sort of green leafy vegetables and non-processed meats so that the body knows how to digest, whether that's Mediterranean or whether that's keto. It's just about having things that the body knows how to basically
Right.
digest.
Right. Because we're putting crap into our bodies for sure. So
Yeah.
I think we talked a little bit about hormone replacement therapy in our conversation because yeah, sure. Yeah. Again, I have ADHD, so I can't always remember, but I remember where I was standing when we had the conversation. I was standing in my closet talking to you. I think you were sick. So I have found that HRT has been game changing for me. And I have always been anti-medication. I have a lot of anxiety and I always like scared of what I put into my body. But I got to the point that I couldn't even exercise because everything hurt. And I couldn't go to sleep through the night without getting up every 2 hours because my bladder, I could not go. And so I've been on hormones for a little more than a year and I feel like myself. But I will say that I still am impacted by my ADHD more than I have been, probably since childhood. And by the way, I am also combined type ADHD. And so that means that I am hyperactive in my body and my brain is constantly spinning, but I don't have it the way that I would have been identified as a little boy. I was always like peeling glue off my hands or doodling or doing something to be moving, but I wasn't the behavior issue that would have caused anyone to send me to get evaluated. As was the case for a lot of women. I think again we present really differently, but my ADHD has gotten worse with my so I am not quite at the 1 year mark. So I'm not menopausal yet, but I think I'm 3 months away. So, the writing is on the wall. But definitely my ADHD has been impacted. And that was one of the reasons I also wanted to talk to you because this is the time that we're going to start to see more and more issues with our hormone levels.
Definitely. And we are, as we're more hormone sensitive. So this is why many ADHD women suffer with PMS, PMDD. They're usually quite big
Mm-hmm.
red flags that it might be a woman that doesn't even know that she's ADHD.
Yep.
But usually, if she's suffering with severe PMS or PMDD, that's not always, but usually quite a big sign that maybe there's some neurodiversity going on. But definitely,
I have to interrupt you for this because I just had Dr. Michael Lenz on my podcast who talks about, he wrote a book on fibromyalgia and chronic pain and ADHD. And I think that that's probably related to the PMDD, which is, I don't know what it stands for, but I know it's more extreme periods, which I know I had, and so did my kids, so debilitating that they couldn't go to school because the cramping was so bad. And I think we are so much more sensitive in every area that of course we would be more sensitive to cramping and to mood swings. So that's just my nickel opinion.
definitely. And I think one thing I've noticed since my hysterectomy, and that's the burnout from masking.
Mhm.
And I suppose I didn't even realize that I was doing the masking. It wasn't until really I started sort of really looking at myself more so because of what was going on. And why was I getting these burnouts? And it was always after like networking events or talking to people that I don't know. And it's not that I'm not being myself. I suppose I'm just more conscious of myself. So I suppose that uses a lot of energy. But I think that's definitely one thing I've noticed is that the burnout after events is a lot worse than it used to be.
You know what? I have noticed exactly the same thing. And I used to have no problem going to things. And now I realize that I'm usually fine to go, or I'm not going to say this anymore. I used to be fine to go. And then I'd be one of the first persons to leave. And I needed to have a role. I needed to be, checking people in, or I was in high school, I was the editor of photography. So I had some purpose and some role for being there. Or I was the person that was doing the dishes at friends' houses because I needed to people please and feel useful. And, so I am also with the ADHD knowledge that I have, I now recognize too that I was also kind of trying to present myself like I had it together, which, again, holding that girdle, right? And then just letting it go. But it's just, for me, the awareness that I have of ADHD, probably the way that you have of perimenopause and menopause, it's life changing in the way that I live my life. And here's a great example. So as I shared with you, my book just came out. So I was like sprint to the finish line. I had a couple conferences I was speaking at. And then this past week, my body just had enough. And I thought I was getting sick. I was supposed to have I wrote a book party and invite people over, and I canceled it. And I literally sat on the couch and I let myself just stop. That would be something I would have never let myself do. But, we can't just go, 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 go always. Like there's a price. There's got to be an ebb and a flow.
Yeah, 100%. And definitely, I'd say I've started sort of doing those boundaries of going, no, I need to just look after me. But one thing, do you think that there's still a stigma around women wanting sort of a diagnosis later in life? Like they're just looking for excuses or being dramatic, or is this a trend that I've heard, why are women suddenly, and it just feels like maybe there's now a stigma around it. What do you think?
Oh, hey there, Grandma Has ADHD listeners. I'm your host, Jami Shapiro, and do I have some exciting news? My book, This Explains So Much, Understanding Undiagnosed ADHD, is now available on Amazon. My mom, Vicki, and I wrote this together. She's the original grandma who inspired this whole journey. I'm calling this the perfect is the enemy of done version, because if I waited until it was perfect, you'd never be holding it in your hands. This book is for us. Those of us who've spent our whole lives feeling like we were too much or never quite enough. Inside, you'll find why you've always felt different, ADHD traits you didn't even know were ADHD traits, how to declutter without the shame spiral, and so much more about thriving with ADHD after 50. Here is the exciting part. Everyone who purchases the book gets free access to a virtual book club that my mom and I are hosting. We're going to share stories, laugh about our ADHD moments, and create that safe space where you can finally take off that girdle. When you read the book, you'll know what I mean, and just be yourself. Here's what to do. Head to Amazon, search This Explains So Much, Jami Shapiro, grab your copy, paperback or ebook, and visit grandmahasadhd.com to take the ADHD quiz and get your book club registration link. Understanding your ADHD isn't adding to your plate. It's finally understanding why your plate has always felt so full. I cannot wait to see you at the book club and hear your stories. And if the book resonates, please leave an Amazon review, as well as for this podcast, to help other women find their light bulb moments. Thank you for being part of this community. This book exists because of all of you.
Ever wondered why helping a loved one declutter feels like speaking different languages? I did, especially with my mom. It wasn't until I founded Silver Linings Transitions, helping San Diego seniors organize and move for over a decade, that I discovered why. We all experience clutter differently, and for those of us with ADHD, it's a whole other world. If you are listening in the San Diego area and feeling stuck with moving, paperwork, photos, or home organization, our team at Silver Linings Transitions gets it. We understand ADHD's unique challenges, and we won't just help you get organized. We'll create sustainable systems that finally stick. Schedule a consultation with our team today at 760-522-1624. That's 760-522-1624, or find us at silverliningstransitions.com.
Hey there, Grandma Has ADHD listeners. I'm your host, Jami Shapiro, and do I have some exciting news? My book, This Explains So Much, Understanding Undiagnosed ADHD, is now available on Amazon. My mom, Vicky, and I wrote this together. She's the original grandma who inspired this whole journey. I'm calling this the perfect is the enemy of done version, because if I waited until it was perfect, you'd never be holding it in your hands. This book is for us, those of us who've spent our whole lives feeling like we were too much or never quite enough. Inside, you'll find why you've always felt different, ADHD traits you didn't even know were ADHD traits, how to declutter without the shame spiral, and so much more about thriving with ADHD after 50. Here is the exciting part. Everyone who purchases the book gets free access to a virtual book club that my mom and I are hosting. We're going to share stories, laugh about our ADHD moments, and create that safe space where you can finally take off that girdle. When you read the book, you'll know what I mean, and just be yourself. Here's what to do. Head to Amazon, search This Explains So Much, Jami Shapiro, grab your copy, paperback or ebook, and visit grandmahasadhd.com to take the ADHD quiz and get your book club registration link. Understanding your ADHD isn't adding to your plate. It's finally understanding why your plate has always felt so full. I cannot wait to see you at the book club and hear your stories. And if the book resonates, please leave an Amazon review, as well as for this podcast, to help other women find their light bulb moments. Thank you for being part of this community. This book exists because of all of you. Yes, thank you for asking. That's going to lead into the Salem Witch question. So it doesn't help that it's called attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, or that it used to be called minimal brain dysfunction. And we all thought of the little boy who was pulled out in class, and we didn't identify the full spectrum of ADHD. And again, I think it's completely misnamed. You're also dealing with not so much the boomers, but the silent generation. I know my mother would say that she was being treated for anxiety and depression her whole life, which, by the way, that was something that was being treated, but it was masking what was really going on, which was the ADHD. And had the ADHD been treated properly, who knows what would have happened to the anxiety and the depression. So, but my grandfather was adamant that my mother not discuss that she was in therapy. You just weren't allowed to discuss things. You held it together. And so that's part of the problem, is that it's been mislabeled. And then because we didn't recognize the full spectrum, we only thought of the troublemaker. But this was the part that got me so excited about being on each other's podcasts. And that was when I was doing research for my book about the history of ADHD. To your point, is it just now here? No, it's been here all along. I was listening to a podcast with, do you know who Jay Shetty is?
No.
He's amazing. He's amazing. He's one of the top health podcasters, at least in the US. But he had Dr. Daniel Amen on, who is a brain health, and I don't know his title, but it's MD. And he was actually talking about ADHD on the podcast. And he said, you can hear biblical mentions. You can go to, look online, Google, Mr. Google, and ask what biblical characters or narratives might touch on ADHD symptoms or something like that. And so I get a whole list of all of these different character traits. But what really got me was when I started to learn about the Salem Witch Trials. And if you look at why were women, persecuted, first of all, the majority of women to be persecuted during the Salem Witch Trials were women in their 40s. Michelle, what happens to women in their 40s?
Oh, I wonder, could it be perimenopause?
Correct. And so they could not live with the Puritan values, and they could not sit still in church, and they were fidgety. And this was the reason that all of these women were persecuted. So you have this history. And then if you think back to our parents and grandparents, in fact, this encapsulates the story so well. So I have a friend who's in the healthcare field here in San Diego, and he was telling me that when he was in his mid-40s, he was convinced he had early onset dementia. So he goes to the doctor because he's got all the typical, he's misplacing items, he's got brain fog, he can't remember names, and he does a full day workup, and they come back and they say, you don't have dementia, you have ADHD. And then he realizes that he has a child with ADHD and a sibling with ADHD and a niece or nephew with ADHD. So I said to him, okay, so which of your parents do you think had ADHD? He said, Neither of my parents had ADHD. Well, we know that ADHD is highly, highly heritable. And I said, Dan, did either of your parents smoke? And he said, oh yeah, my mom smoked smoked like a chimney, I think was what he said. But back in World War I, cigarettes were introduced to the troops to calm them down. So they were basically smoking their Ritalin. And so we didn't see it. So there you go. It's been there.
Yeah. Oh, no, definitely. And I've had similar conversations, funny enough, where we said, oh, about how, when someone said, oh, why are we suddenly talking about perimenopause and things? I said, well, actually, women were put in asylums.
Yes.
And that was then when I went, do you know what? And it wouldn't surprise me if that was the reason that women were portrayed as witches. And there we go.
Yeah.
That, and it makes sense because we are suddenly acting differently,
Mm-hmm.
out of character.
Mm-hmm.
And if back then, if you are sort of more fidgety or brain fog or acting like you're a bit doolally, then maybe that was, one of the reasons. That also, like, talking more, and particularly with ADHD women, I think the hormones kind of sometimes can sort of make us sort of bit more hyper. And of course, if the women are, like you say, women back in the day, I think I even saw a contraption that used to sort of put over a woman's head with her tongue, so because the husband or something said that she kept talking too much or something back in the Middle Ages. It looked absolutely horrific.
Well, I mean, when you hear stories of how women were treated and, just, I don't know, this is totally going off topic, but have you heard of the book, The Feminine Mystique?
No.
So it was a book that came out in the 1960s and was by Betty Friedan. And all of a sudden, she was exposing how women wanted more than being housewives and mothers, and they were not always satisfied. So women were coping with the Quaaludes and the Valium and the, whatever they were taking back then. This is when anxiety meds came out because they couldn't handle it anymore. Now all of a sudden they heard that they weren't alone. And that's sort of actually how I feel about my book and also menopause. It's like finally we are, and I think that's one of the great things about the internet is that we are able to see ourselves and other people. And I also think this generation, for as many things as I don't like about the Gen Z, and I love the fact that they are stepping into who they are, living unapologetically. I don't know about your family or your world, but in my family, nobody was gay. None of my cousins, we didn't think anybody was gay. And now all of my cousins, not all of them, but at least one of my aunts or uncles has a gay grandchild. I have a gay child. I'm now looking back at my cousin who passed, never married, never had kids. So I think that it's been there. It's been there, but now we're allowed to express it and we have more knowledge.
Yeah. I think something else is that ADHD can also bring this sort of endless guilt. So for not finishing things, for not remembering, for not being able to find your car keys, which is your car keys, or feeling like you're too much for people. And that's a big one. And I know, like, lots of my friends sort of joke, and it's not meant with any malice, but sometimes, like, we say about how I talk a lot or talk loudly. And I get it, I do. But it can sometimes make you feel like, oh, am I being a bit too much for people? Do I need to rein it in? How have you sort of learned to sort of manage or reframe that kind of self-talk so that you're not feeling like this guilt all the time?
That is a great question. And I also think that exactly what you said is the reason that people with ADHD are more likely to have social anxiety. And I have absolutely been told, tone it down, be Jami light. Can't, in fact, my book, I have to just tell you the subtitle is for those who have too much, the accumulation, feel too much, or have been told they are too much. So, I think because I've sort of become the ADHD poster child, and I also hear that it's an explanation and not an excuse. So I did actually have someone at a conference say that she knew I had ADHD, and I've been doing it with you too, because I kept interrupting and I wasn't listening. So I think awareness is really important because that is valid, and I think as we mature, we're able to sort of pause. And so I think that awareness is important. But in terms of the guilt, I think, and I was actually listening to another podcast, it's like recognition of what I have accomplished and sitting and being proud of it and honoring my, my energy level, like I told you about this weekend. And so I think that has been really, really helpful. And again, as we open the door to more of these conversations, and it's just to say, hey, I just want to acknowledge that you might be interrupting a little bit. And I know that you have ADHD, but just wanted to make you aware, like there's a way to say something, because I think you and I both know that if we hear 10 positive things and one negative thing, we're going to dwell on which one? The negative. Like we're going
The
to,
negative. Yeah.
right. I mean, I didn't know we had a negativity bias. And again, because we were criticized most of our lives with, why can't you get it together? Why can't you find your stuff? Why is your room a mess? Why do you keep quitting your classes? So I think that we have to start first with compassion for ourselves. And that's one of the things that has been really a big part of my podcast is like, you have been cobbling it together your entire life. Like you didn't even know that you were building in accommodations for yourself. And that's exactly what you were doing. And, our brains, I see the gifts of our brains. And, there's a lot of people call it toxic positivity. I'm not for one moment saying that ADHD is all positive, because it is absolutely not. But it is finding the things that are good about it and leaning into that versus focusing on all of the things that we don't do well or we didn't finish.
Mm. Yeah. And I remember listening to quite a few friends, particularly the not finishing things or not remembering things. Were a couple of my friends, I remember listening to them, and that was sort of the thing that used, but then they didn't know. It was only years later that they sort of realized what was sort of going on. But with the ADHD side, it was always very, very obvious. And I just didn't really ever mention it, or just kind of, because I didn't really feel like it mattered. I didn't really need a diagnosis until obviously after the hysterectomy and the hormones started having more of a play. But I think what shocked me more was the more I was kind of researching things, that I started to suspect, well, maybe I am autistic as well. I don't know. Ooh. And so I bit the bullet and got an assessment, which I finally had only a couple of weeks ago. And turns out that, yes, I am. And it hit me in quite an emotional way, because it was only when the assessor was saying stuff to me and it made a lot of sense. And you've sort of been open about that grief and identity sort of crisis. Now, I'm still me, it's fine. And I haven't really bothered mentioning it to really anybody, because at the end of the day, it's that side of things is manageable anyway. But how did it sort of show up for you after your sort of diagnosis of ADHD, and what sort of helped you, again, sort of similar with the grief, but anything else that sort of helped you move through that as well?
Well, so as I said, when I first found out, I'm like busy living. So I didn't pay attention to what the impact of ADHD really was. And it really wasn't until I took a class when I was getting my coaching certification with ADCA, that's the Attention Deficit Disorder Coaching Academy. And there's a class called Personal Transformation. So you're just kind of learning the very boring ADHD high level stuff. And there wasn't really much that I had learned. But when I went through the curriculum with other people who had ADHD, it was the first time that I had taken a class, understanding my brain with other people. And then we had peer groups where we were getting together weekly. And, when I heard other people and I heard their experiences, I realized the impact that ADHD really had throughout my life. And I just want to share that I have a cousin who has a PhD in marriage and family therapy who also has ADHD. And we were talking about the book because she said, I never read also, but I'm now realizing how many areas that ADHD impacts that I had no idea. So I do think, and that's one of the things I definitely touch on, is that grief and relief, especially for older adults who are discovering it. And, there's a quote that I like by Maya Angelou: when you know better, you do better. And if you didn't know, how could you beat yourself up? I mean, and if you now give yourself grace, because we all deserve that grace. And even my mom and my relationship, by the way, has transformed in a way that I would never have believed possible, because she was emotionally dysregulated. I was emotionally dysregulated. There was so much And I now have an empathy for my mother. And I realized she didn't give me ADHD on purpose, just like I didn't give my children ADHD on purpose. And I will say that I'm very spiritually bent. And so I truly believe that I have ADHD because I'm meant to do something with that. And there are talents, we are super creative. We're able to think outside the box. We're able to come up with solutions. Now, it's interesting. I don't know as much about autism and ADHD, but I have heard they play together frequently, and that you have this one craving for structure and you need the routine. And then you have the ADHD that says, oh, no, 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 I want to party, right? And I would love to explore an episode with you on this. Has come up quite a bit lately, too, is a lot of people are hearing more and more are learning that they have autism. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's where the burnout comes through the most, is because I've got the what I now know is the autism kind of fighting, where, like you say, I like things in the right place. I like order. I like my house being clean and tidy. And then I blink and I've decided just to, oh, I know, I'm going to clear out my wardrobe and I'm going to sort it all out. And then I look and the whole bedroom is a complete mess. In fact, my other half came home the other week and I'd literally pulled some boxes out and I was sorting through them and everything was everywhere. And he was like, okay, right. One of those days again. I was like, yeah. And then the other side of me was going, right, now I need to really get this all cleared away because I can't live like this. This has to be all sorted out. So it is constant. This what the assessor was saying, that actually the ADHD is a bit stronger. That's why I'm more kind of on the hyper, and I'm combined as well. So everything's sort of everywhere. But interestingly, with my mum, she got diagnosed with chronic fatigue.
Mm.
And
A ding, ding, ding for you now.
yeah, what the whole journey, we've actually, because of this, with what I'm doing now, we've realized that I hadn't joined the dots for the ADHD at the time, but I had said to my mum, the reason, because I feel really bad because I knew she didn't have chronic fatigue, but I knew equally she wasn't faking it, but it was because she'd have good and bad. I don't know, it was just hard to explain why. But now I realize at the time it was perimenopause that was causing a lot of the issues when she had this, literally she could barely get off the sofa some days. And I was just a child. But then also with now realizing ADHD, we're trying to get her diagnosed so she can sort of learn some coping strategies, and whether medication will, I mean, it has helped. It's not for everybody. I'm not a medication type person, but I have to not the Ritalin side. It's the Elvance that I've started taking, and it has really, really helped me with sort of focus, because I just felt like I was constantly treading water and going around in circles.
Sure.
At that point.
I don't know about how it is over in the UK, but here a lot of physicians are not trained on ADHD, and especially not in older adults. And so my mother's doctor just said, well, we don't even treat ADHD, which, by the way, isn't the case. You have to find a doctor who has taken the time to understand it, because, again, they grew up in a time when we didn't recognize it in women. And I do know, and I don't talk about medication on my podcast much either, even when I have a doctor, because I recognize that when you are aging, you're probably taking other medications for other age-related issues, and sometimes they don't mix with other medications. But I will say that one of the biggest things and one of my biggest passions is explaining the word gerotranscendence. Have you heard of that before?
No.
So Erik Erikson was a famous sociologist in the US, and he looked at the 8 stages, life stages, and they were, the different from toddler and infancy to what we go through as we age. And when he and his wife got into their 80s, he realized that he had not really discussed or discovered what happens then when when you are coming to the end of your life. So gerotranscendence is about that reflection, looking at your life, the choices that you've made, your relationships, your regrets, and really coming to peace with it. And I think that when you understand that ADHD has been at play, then, like, for instance, my mother did not graduate college, and my mother is very bright. And I remember when she was in her 40s, she worked for a company that offered tuition reimbursement. I'm like, okay, You don't have kids at home anymore. You just gone through a divorce. Perfect time to go to college. And my mom said, well, I can't focus. And I didn't understand it then. And now I do. And so, I think that acceptance of that ADHD and that understanding of that ADHD is going to help us, complete our life. And I don't know also about the UK, but here there's so much anti-aging. There's the word is anti-aging. I'm like, no, I had cancer more than 20 years ago, 34 when I was diagnosed. You want to age. That is what we want. Why are we saying anti-aging? So that's a whole other soapbox that I'm on. But that is really where the intersection of my work really lives, is living out with my ADHD and saying to older adults, hey, this is what it is. This explains so much. I mean, that was why that was the cover of my book. It explains so much. So I don't even remember the question that you asked me, Michelle.
That's fine. I think, again, with my mum, unfortunately, she's in Scotland, and apparently her part of Scotland, they won't diagnose ADHD in adults at all, even though another reason that many women have gone without a diagnosis is also because it wasn't recognized in girls anyway, and all the assessments were based on boy traits, so we were
Or
kind of
kids.
missed. Yeah.
Right. Or kids.
So, and now it's just becoming more obvious, or in my mum's case, looking back, like you say, it's definitely more obvious now. But yeah, unfortunately, they're like, no, we only diagnose children, not adults.
They think it does, just like I did when I found out. I'm like, okay, I'm 45. Why does it matter? And, I always bring up examples, but I had another guest on my podcast he's Alan P. Brown. He's the ADD crusher, and he goes out and he coaches and he does presentations. And he said he had an 87-year-old man in his audience who came up to him and said that he had been diagnosed with ADHD at 87 years ago. And he said it was the best 7 years of his life. And so I say to people, at what point do you want to stop growing or understanding yourself better or putting the pieces together? And, one of the beauties of ADHD is our natural curiosity. So, we do want to learn about things that interest us. And so learning about ADHD and its impact, again, it's just, there's a forgiveness that comes, a gentleness that comes with yourself, that grace. I love the word grace. I mean, I hate to use it, but I love it. It's such a good word.
No, yeah. And if there's a woman sort of listening who suspects that she might be ADHD, but feels like it's too late or it's not serious enough, what would you want her to hear? Is there something specific that you think she should hear right now?
I think that if she's open to medication, then please find a physician or a therapist or a psychiatrist that is an adult that understands ADHD. And that's key, that you have to find someone who has studied it and understands it and doesn't think it's not a thing. And I would just say it is a thing. It's absolutely a thing. And if you have a child that's being diagnosed or a grandchild or a sibling, again, it's highly, highly heritable. And I would just encourage you to learn, because when you learn, there's just no point where understanding yourself isn't going to be helpful. So and then to your point too, that grief and that relief, all we can do is adjust our attitude. This is what we've got. And where do we go from here? And where can I lean into where this is a superpower? And where can I understand my energy level? Kind of like a woman in her 50s who is, I think what happens, and you should talk more about the menopause and behavior, but just there is also more of a freedom. Like, I'm not taking care of kids anymore. I don't have the same responsibilities. I get to figure out who I am. Right. And I think that's a double conversation, both for women, generally neurotypical women, right? And neurodiverse women.
Yeah, as women, we just don't look after ourselves. And this is where I say perimenopause, menopause is such a positive time, because we are of an age, okay, sometimes we're bookended with children and elderly parents, but also we can be of an age where our children are older, and we do have that time now where we can find ourselves again. Because I always try and also say, don't try and get that person who you were before, because you're evolving. You want to literally look forward and say, right, who am I now? And try new things. And it can be a really fun time, sort of finding finding the new you, or the future you, or whichever way you want to sort of put it.
I love that. That seems like such a good way to end our podcast. I don't know how you feel about that.
Yeah, no, exactly that. And where can people find you?
Oh, thank you. So I think you can listen to my podcast, Grandma Has ADHD, or you can find me at jamishapiro.me. That's JAMISHAP as in Paul, IRO.me, because believe it or not, I could not get my own domain name. I could not get jamishapiro.com. But yes, yeah, that's true. But I think .me is so perfect because that is exactly who I am. I am living authentically. So that's where you can find out about my coaching and my book. And I'm going to have an online program for women who are discovering their ADHD. It kind of combines that self-acceptance with decluttering and downsizing, because that's been missing from the downsizing, right sizing conversation. So that's where you can find me. And what about you, Michelle? Where can my listeners find you and your podcast?
Yeah, so my podcast is Menopause, the Real Deal, on Spotify and Apple. I'm Michelle Rowlinson, ROWLINSON, on Facebook, or Michelle_Rowlinson on TikTok, or my website, which is panaceapause.co.uk. But obviously, I'll have your links in my show notes as well. So
The same. It was really great. I'm sorry if I dominate, because I'm going to get off the call and I'm going to ruminate. Oh, I couldn't shut up. So for those of you who are listening, it's very real. I'm keeping it real.
no, you're absolutely fine. I think we were quite equal, so don't worry.
Well, I appreciate it. It was great. And I definitely want to have you back on my podcast because I would love to explore autism. I really haven't gotten into it. And I know that ADHD is also more and more people are discovering that as well. And I would love to learn more about it.
Brilliant. And I will just add for those in the UK that if you are suspecting, there's long waits on the NHS, but if you go through the right to choose, and I personally chose ADHD 360, and you sort of fill out the form and then take it to your GP, and your GP will then do a referral, and that's a quicker process. But just check that your GP does do shared care, because that's important, because once you get a diagnosis, your GP surgery needs to be on board with shared care, so then the prescriptions can then be moved over to your GP surgery. But that's just another way of getting a diagnosis in the UK.
That's awesome. And I will just say too that going to your general physician here, occupational therapy is something that if medicine isn't available to you, a lot of us can get occupational therapy for our ADHD, which would then be covered by insurance. So, and then of course there's ADHD coaching and all of that for when you learn about it. But I'm going to totally TMI on you and tell you that I have not been quote unquote formally diagnosed either. My child's been diagnosed. Two of my children have been diagnosed. My mother's been diagnosed. My father has it. I have a physician that actually gives me Wellbutrin, which is an off label for ADHD, and it actually works well enough for me that I've gone with it, but I would never hesitate to go and get that formal diagnosis if I needed the medication to do better. So that was a TMI. We probably could have just stopped it, but here we are.
That's fine. Well, thank you ever so much for being on Menopause, the Real Deal as well.
And thank you for being on Grandma Has ADHD.
The opinions expressed on Grandma Has ADHD podcast are those of our guests and hosts and are intended for informational and entertainment purposes only. This podcast does not provide medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment. The content discussed in this episode is not a substitute for professional medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment. Always seek the advice of your physician, mental health professional, or other qualified health provider with any questions you may have regarding a medical condition or mental health concern. Never disregard professional medical advice or delay in seeking it because of something you have heard on this podcast. If you think you may have a medical emergency, call your doctor or emergency services immediately. The hosts, guests, and producers of Grandma Has ADHD do not assume any liability for the content of this podcast. Listen at your own discretion.